No. The main guy was Peter Rock. Yeah, Peter Rock. That's who's in. Along with number 4. You are Peter. Black Panther. He looks like the guy. Looks like the guy from okay. Well, how are you? It's amazing. Like he's in 2 families. More relaxed thoughts. Good.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, just 5 quick announcements. Let me just see if I think I'm recording. Yeah. Am I recording? Yes. Okay. Yeah. So announcement number 1, quiz 5 is due tonight. So if you haven't done quiz 5 yet, make sure you do that tonight. Announcement number 2, I'm still marking lab 5. Announcement number 3, there will be no lab assigned for this class because your assignment is due Sunday. So that I consider your big lab, I guess. All right. So again, your assignment 1 is due this Sunday, midnight. So this class, oh yeah, and next week is the midterm, and it'll be here in class. And then for this class, I'm just going to try to teach a bunch of assorted hodgepodge stuff real quickly. I'm going to try to squeeze it in 1 hour. And then the rest of the remaining class will be the work period, where I'm hoping we can all help each other debug. What I don't want to happen is for me to be the only one, and there's like a lineup for me to debug. What I'm hoping is that everyone will share their expertise. And I was going to name a few people, but okay, I'll name them right now. So if you need help and I am busy, please ask either, and I'm going to name a few people. Joshua, right there. So wave your hands, Josh. Umar, right there. Wave your hand. Yeah, I'm pointing at you, Umar. Andre, right there with the green hat. Brando, right there with the black shirt. Joel, right there in the green shirt. Vivian, Jaden, and including Tatiana, too, as well. All right, so if I am busy, please ask one of them as well. So what I'm going to do today, what I'm going to talk about today is real quick stuff. Event bubbling, progressive enhancement. But even before I get to that, I'm going to just quickly talk about some other quick stuff, something called the for of loops, which is pretty new. Object entries, which is pretty new as well. We're going to talk about GitHub Markdown and how you can view Markdown in your VS Code as well as a preview. So the first thing that I want to get just put out there is something called object entries. Object entries is a pretty new feature that just came out last year. And it has 3 things. You could have object.entries, object.values, and object.keys. So here is the MDN definition of object.entries. If you ever need to use this, what it does is let's say you have an object right there. Object 1 equals this object. And then you could say something like this, object.entries. Now notice object, you just say object, okay? And it has a static method called .entries. And then you pass in the variable of your object. and you can get an array. In this case, the entries will give you an array of whatever's in here in the form of key value format. So let's just do that right now. Let me just run it right here. Yes. So let me try this. Run. Okay, yeah, that's what we got. What happens if I take away that one there? It should give me the whole array. And there. See, so object.entries, you pass in the object, it gives you an array of that same object, but in array format, if you ever should need it. Okay, so I like to think of it as, oh, it's like a translator between the object and the array kind of thing. Okay, so that's the first one. Object.values is even simpler. So here you have an object. Notice the key values are A is some string, B is 42, C is false. So object.values of that object will give you an array again, but only the values, the properties, or the values rather, the right-hand side of that, of each property. Okay, and similarly, object keys is again very simple. Here's another object here. If you say object.keys of that object, it'll give you another array, but this time on the left-hand side. Okay, so here, let me just see. You don't have to hand this in, so I'm just going to demonstrate this. Well, let's say I have an object called inventory. Okay, and I'm going to use the object keys method to make a quick nav. So my nav will be like all the different items like backpacks, jeans, but in nav format with embedded in list tags. And so what I could say is something like this. So here I'm saying object.keys of my entire object, which is this one. Okay, and so object.keys takes everything on the left-hand side, so backpacks, jeans, and hoodies. And so this represents each of those items. And I'm just embedding it into list tags as a string. And then I'm joining each of those individual strings into one big string so that nav contains one big entire string of list items. Okay, so that's something, a use case that you could possibly use it for. Object.values. Let me comment this one out. Object.values is, let's say, I wanted an inventory count. So I want to count how many items I have for each of these key value pairs. So what I could do, I could say object.values of that object, which gives me an array of the right-hand side. And now that I have an array of the right-hand side stuff, so it's like an array of numbers, basically, I can reduce that using that reduce function that I taught you last week to sum up all the right-hand side values. So console log A should output there, 48. Okay, that's another useful case. Let me comment that out. Object entries. Oh, you know, I just said invent your own exercise. That's all I want to say about object entries, object keys, and object values. Okay. That was a quick run through that. Here's another quick run through that I think you might need to know. Again, not for the assignment, not for the exam, but just useful. I think it's one of those things that are useful. So it's called the for of. So you already know things like the for loop. So here, for example, I have a couple of objects. Here I have an array of different objects. Now, for of loops, it can loop over iterables. That's something that's important. So iterables are arrays, strings, or node lists. Yes. So remember how we can't use map on node lists because node list is not an array? Well, you can use for of on node lists because node list is considered an iterable. And one pro of using for of loops is that you can break from it. And so in the loop itself, you could just say break. You could have some kind of test condition. If something, break out of that loop if you need to. You could say that. For of loops cannot handle objects. So I'm going to show you something you already know, the regular for loop, which all of you know. Okay, so I'm going to loop over my heroes object using the method that you all know and love. Okay, I'm just going to use the old style here. So you all know this kind of thing. Well, you're starting to create a for loop. So this is just a regular for loop. This is not a for of loop. This is just a regular for loop that you all know. Console.log heroes I. Okay, so there's my output here. All of you understand that, right? That's basic. Okay. Now, oh, I just read my comments wrong. So the pro of the for loop is you can break from it. The con of this style is it's not concise. When you read this, it's not beautiful. It's not aesthetically, language-wise, philosophical, wise. It's not as concise or beautiful. So then a little later, JavaScript invented the for each method, right? So the for each method kind of looks like this, for each, and then you could have a function. I'm just going to use an arrow function. You could say something like this. There. See, I still have my objects. It's the same exact output, but I'm now using a for each instead of a for loop. So the pro here of using a for each loop is it's concise. So that's something over the older for style loop. The con is you cannot break from a for each style. You need to. So the old for loop is still better in terms of if you need to break from it. So that's why they invented the new for of loop. So what that looks like is it's both concise and you can break from it. So you could have something like this, for hero of heroes, so log hero. There it is again. Okay. So here you have the ability to break inside it. So you could have, if something break if you need to, and it's concise as well. You're not dealing with this kind of line here. That's what I wanted to mention. So here I have an example here. So I put 3 heading tags here, right? And so we've all done this already where we use document.querySelector_all. And what does that return? It returns a node list. So if I just grab all that, I could say something like this, for, and then I could say, h1 of headings, console log h1. There. So this is still, headings is still a node list, but the for of allows me to iterate over a node list. That's all I want to say about that. Okay, that's pretty neat. Okay, now it's a little bit longer topic. I'm going to talk about event bubbling. So this is something that's happening under the hood that you may need to know in the future. So what happens, the question is, what happens when you click on something that you've listened for? Okay, so here in my little diagram here, I have an event listener for this A tag right here. So when you click on something on the web page, what really happens under the hood, there's 2 things happening. There's something called the capturing phase, which is represented in green. And what that does is the browser kind of narrows down according to your HTML structure. So it starts with your HTML tag, it goes down to the body tag, it goes down to whatever tag, and finds that one element that you clicked on. However, each time it goes successfully down the hierarchy, it captures that. Then when it finds out, oh, you clicked on this A anchor tag or whatever, then what happens is it bubbles back up. As it bubbles back up, it fires and triggers the event so that it'll run your code now. Okay, so let's try this. Again, you don't have to hand this in. I'll just do this. Whoa. Okay, so let's take a look at the HTML structure of whatever I have here. So I have 3 divs, but notice they're all nested. Okay, so I have 3 divs. They're nested one inside each other. I'm going to listen and add a click event for all of those divs. So let's say this, const divs equals document.query selector all. I'm going to listen for all the div tags. I'm going to listen. I'm going to add an event listener for all of them. Now I'm going to do something a little bit different here. I'm going to use the for each instead of the regular map one, just to show that you could do this as well. So for each of those div elements, I'm going to add a click event. And then what do I want it to do? I want it to run a function, which I'll define in a second, called log text. So what is that function? That'll be defined here. Log text, console log, and I'll just say this. Okay, so let's see what happens. I'm going to go open up the console. Actually, let me open up this console here. Figure it out, Control L. All right, magnify. So now that I've now that I've added an event listener for all the divs, that means this has an event listener for click, this one does too, and this 3 does as well. What do you think will happen when I click the middle one right here? Is it going to display for me? It's gonna console log this, but what is this? So let's see what happens. Okay, so click. Whoa. There. It console logged 3, which is the innermost one, but it also console logged 2, which is the next outer one in the hierarchy, plus it console logged 1. And had I listened for the body tag, it would have printed the body as well. Okay, so that's the bubbling up process that you're seeing there. So because I listened for all 3, if I click on this one, it'll fire for all 3 as well. Okay, so again, the picture is, as it's going down, it's capturing all the divs, all 3 divs. Then once it gets to the innermost div, it then fires my event, the click event, and then fires the next div up, and then fires the next div up. And that's what you're seeing here. So it fires the innermost one, fires the next one, fires the next one. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, so it captures top down, it bubbles bottom up, and that's when the events trigger. So that's when it runs my function on the way up. Now, there's an optional third parameter there. It's called an options object. By default, that options object is always capture equals false. So what's really happening here is here, when you're adding a click event and running a function, you can actually optionally say this third argument. By default, it's always false. So I'm doing nothing different here by saying capture. But watch what happens. Oh, let me just test that. Let me prove it. Here, click on the innermost one, click, same thing, right? So now watch what happens if I say capture is true. Save that. Here this on the middle one. Click. Now notice the result is the opposite. It's showing the outer one first, then 2, then 3. Why is that happening? Because, remember this diagram, because capture is true, we're saying don't fire the events on the way up anymore, rather fire the events on the way down. So this, let's pretend this is the outermost div. It captures that, it fires, and that's why you see the console log of 1 first. It captures the second div, fires, captures the third div, fires, and then bubbles back up. But it doesn't fire on the way back up because you already said capture is true. Okay. All right. What did I say next? So now my function log text will no longer run on the bubble up, but rather on the capture down. Okay, great. I'm going to delete the capture object for now. So let's go back to what we had before. Same thing before. Let's just test it out. Right, same thing before. Okay. This time, I'm going to say this line right here. So in this function, I could say something like this: E stop propagation. So the E represents the event, the click event. And so what this will do, actually, let me click it, innermost box, and see what happens. So click, 3. If I click on the second one, click, it only gives me the 2. First one, only the 1. The innermost one again, 3 again. So what's happening is when it runs on the way up, when it bubbles up, right? So let's say I click on the innermost div. It fires my console log, which is why you see 3. But then notice in my code, even before it console logs my 3, it stops the propagation, which means it will no longer go up, bubble up. So that means there's no more future events being fired. Okay. All right. What happens if we have captures true and the E stop propagation? All right, let's try that. Let's try that. So let's add in that captures true. That. So before I click on it, let's try to predict what's going to happen. So captures true means it's going to fire the events on the way down. Okay, so even if I click on this innermost one, it should really look at the first one, this one here. So I predict it's going to say 1 and then immediately stop printing anything in the future. Let's see if that happens. So click, click. There he goes, 1. Okay. Very good. And then the final thing I wanted to mention was, right. Okay, so let's change this back. Actually, let's just remove this. No, I'm going to change it back to false. So back to false, which is what we had before. And then what else did I say? Okay, and there's also one more thing called another option called once. So what's happening here? Let's try that. So you can actually add another option. Let me just make this a little bit more pretty. Once true. You could also say once true. So let me take away my comment out of my E stop propagation. So the only real difference here is it's just like the first example we had, but it's just now once is true. Okay, so now what's going to happen is if I click on innermost one, click again, but notice the more I click it, it doesn't matter. So what's really happening for the once is true is really happening is something like this. You're saying div.remove event listener for that div. So the once true will fire only once, and then it'll remove the binding. So behind the scenes, it's almost as if you're saying remove event listener of that element. So one use case you could do is, let's say you're making a web page with store checkouts, and you only want the user to press the buy button only once. Okay, so here I have in my HTML, I think I have a button called buy, which you can see right there. Okay, so then let's try that out. So let's say const button equals document query selector button. Oh, not that. Button. And let's add an event listener. Button, add event listener, click. And when I want click, I'll just log it out. But I'm going to pass in the ones that's true. So that means when I console log it, or when I look at my console log, clear it out. I click on buy. It showed in console, and click buy again. Buy. It doesn't. It's not affected. So that's one use case, is like if you want to make sure that the user doesn't click buy button more than once, kind of thing. Right? So that is event bubbling. And so again, just to review, whenever you click on something, there's two things happening. It's capturing all the elements as it's narrowing down on what you clicked on. Then normally it bubbles back up and it fires each event to run your code as it does that. Okay. Any questions on event bubbling? Okay. We're going to slowly get into the in-class exercise that'll be due today. And because it's an in-class exercise, we're all gonna do it together. But first, I want to just show you something real quick. Who here, show of hands, who's here has ever written in Markdown before? Markdown format. Markdown? No? Okay. So you know how go to any GitHub repository, like, I don't know, Bootstrap, whatever. Usually they're README. This. Usually they have a readme.md file. The MD stands for Markdown. It's just a text file kind of thing. But notice how nice it looks. Notice how nice their documentation looks. How did they do that? How did they do this? The answer is Markdown. Okay, so what Markdown is, it's kind of like the opposite of HTML, kind of. I don't know how to explain it, but here's what it does. So let's say, actually, let me go back to one of my things here. I think I have an example. Yeah. Here I did this documentation for this project that I was playing with, and notice how you have the headings. Notice how you have the links. You have this code sample here. How did I do that? I'll show you. I'll click on this edit, and you can see behind the scenes what's really happening. So my headings have this hashtag. That represents H1. If I have two hashtags, that represents H2. If I use this backtick, so backtick, and then I end it with backtick, that means anything inside that block is your code sample. Oh yeah, sorry. So if you want a code sample, you can start it off with 3 backticks and end it off with three backticks. And then inside that, you can put whatever code you want. Furthermore, if you want some kind of code highlighting, you could actually say after the backticks, okay, the following code will be JavaScript code. And so as soon as you save, it'll display that code with the correct JavaScript syntax highlighting, or HTML, or CSS, or whatever code, PHP, whatever. Okay. So some of the things you can do is the headings, right? So this represents an H1 tag, which makes it look big like this. Syntax guide is probably an H1. And then this with the 2 hashtags, that's an H2. Is something like that. I'm guessing. You could have lists ordered. So this is just a different way of creating a web page real quick. If you wanted to insert images, you can do something like this. If you wanted to insert links, you could do something like this. And for your in-class exercise, I'm going to ask you to use the headers and quotes. So you're going to quote a couple of quotations from an article using this kind of style. So when you use this style, it comes out as, let's see here, it comes out like this. See? So this is the output, including this little vertical bar. That is the output of just using this Markdown. Okay, so this is how developers document their readme.md in GitHub or whatever. It doesn't have to be GitHub. This is what Markdown is. It's just a real fast way to create documentation. You don't have to worry about HTML tags. You just have to put these hashtags and other tags, and you got your nice looking documentation. I'm going to make you have some experience with today's in-class exercise for that. Also, I noted here, VS Code has a markdown preview feature. So check this out. I'm going to open up VS Code for a sec. Close that up. Let me zoom in. Oh, hey. Plugs aren't working? Oh, are you serious? Oh, man. Oh, man. I have no idea. I can call somebody. I don't know. Oh, man. And there's, oh, shoot. Is this something I turned off here? I'm going to turn on everything. Okay, everything's on, I believe. Does that help? I don't know. I'm just assuming this controls that. I really don't know. I think this just controls the lights. So unless there's another switch that I don't know about, or if they're, yeah, I don't know.
Working for you guys? Yeah, well, it might be a switch there. Maybe one on both sides.
What's MSU for?
I don't know. I don't know what these switches mean. Does that work? Okay. So you know what? We'll make this in-class exercise due Friday then. So this is what I want you to do. Oh yeah, so I was going to explain how VS Code has a preview. So what's nice about VS Code is it already has a nice preview option if you were to create an MD file. So I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to call it, readme.md. Okay. And then on the upper right corner here, you'll see a this icon right here with the magnifying glass called Open Preview to the side. I'm going to click that. Click. Notice how you have now a preview, which means this is what it's going to look like on GitHub or elsewhere if you were to publish this. So let's try it. So I'm going to say hashtag for heading 1. I'm going to say hello world. So that's how it's going to look like in GitHub. If I were to type some text, okay, that's regular text. We all know that. What if I were to do the backtick? So backtick, JS code, enter, back. So, and then in here, I'll say this kind of thing. Look how nice it outputs. So I don't have to worry about HTML formatting whatsoever. It does it for me. So if I were to upload this right now to GitHub, it would look like that. Okay. Same thing for links. I think the link. Oh shoot! I keep on forgetting. Now that's why I have a link here for you to refer to how to do stuff. So how to do a link. I think it's somewhere here. Oh, right here. Link to Google. So if I just copy that and go in my VS Code, link to Google. See, notice how it's like an anchor tag, right? So the words link to Google is coming from here, but the actual link that it goes to is coming from here, right? Sort of like your href tag. So that's the kind of thing that I just want you to be aware of in the future. You may need to do something like this on GitHub to create your own documentation. So just realize that. So here is the in-class exercise. So actually, before we do that, I'm going to talk about the traditional definition of progressive enhancement. Show of hands, who here has learned about the progressive enhancement for any of their previous classes, either with Scott or wherever? Term progressive enhancement. Didn't Scott talk about that in any class before? He must have. Come on, he's like the progressive enhancement. He's okay. Okay, so let me quickly review what you should have learned and what most developers have learned in the past regarding progressive enhancement. And this is a book that I got learning JavaScript. This book right here was the textbook for Georgian College for quite a while. So here's the definition. Progressive enhancement is basically creating a functional separation between HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It's a layered approach where you focus on content, the user, and accessibility. So the first step is keeping your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript separated. And those are called layers. So you have the structure layer, which is the HTML, the presentation layer, which is the CSS, that makes it look pretty, and the behavior layer, which is your JavaScript. So your first focus is always on content. Mark it up with good semantics. That's your structure. After that's marked up, then you can focus on the presentation layer, which is the CSS. After that, then you can focus on JavaScript. Okay, so this diagram is the traditional philosophy that web developers have been learning for the longest time. Yeah, kind of like the MVC. The interesting thing about this philosophy, these three layers, is that they are never intended to touch each other, yet they're all integrated. And as you move up the ladder, the next layer is dependent upon the previous. JavaScript needs CSS, CSS needs HTML. As long as you keep your layers separate, make your site work with only HTML, pretty it up with CSS, and then smooth out the behavior with JavaScript. That is essentially the traditional definition of progressive enhancement. Does that sound familiar? Okay, let's do a little experiment. I want you to open up Chrome and disable your JavaScript. Here's how to do it. So select the settings from the three-dot menu. So here's my three-dot menu. Get my other slide showing in my other screen so I won't lose it. Okay, so click on the three dots menu. Then click on settings. So try this out on your computer. We're going to disable JavaScript temporarily and see what happens here. Settings. You should see this kind of screen. Scroll to the bottom of that screen, and then you'll see this advanced right here. So click that advanced. And then some more stuff comes up. Then look for content settings, which should be right here. There, content settings, right here. Click on that. Then you should see this one right here, JavaScript. So click on JavaScript. And then there's a toggle switch right here. So switch this toggle to the other one. So it's now blocked. Okay, so keep that tab, don't close it so you can quickly turn it back on when you need to. But now that is turned off, this is what I want you to do. Open up a new tab and visit the following websites. So have fun with this. I'll give you a few minutes to try this out, and I'll hear back from your reports. So you have Netflix, you have New York Times, you have YouTube. Oops. None of the events work. What was that? None of the events work. None of the events work? On Netflix, yeah. So on Netflix, you're having some problems navigating, right? Yeah, because there's JavaScript turned off, right? So there's one example where Netflix does not work because you turned off JavaScript, which means their website is rendered useless. New York Times, try that. Try New York Times, try YouTube, try a regular Google search, try some news outlets like BBC News, or try even maps.google. That should be a fun one, maps.google. Try some traditional ones like Wikipedia. Wikipedia should be okay, I think. Try Twitter. So try some of these ones for a few minutes, and you get to report back to me what you've experienced. Which one is that one? Pinterest? Just blank, right? Right. What's YouTube showing, Josh? What is it? It's just a wireframe. How about, did anyone try Maps Google yet? Yeah, how does that look like? Sherlock Holmes? Oh.
It looks like it renders like the old Google too, like from the 1990s.
Yeah, yeah. Yes.
What are teaching in lazy? It just looks like how it looks in your old BlackBerry. Yeah, it works fine.
Yahoo's works fine. Out of my websites that I listed here, I would anticipate that Wikipedia is probably the best, most resilient one out of all of them. Yeah. Okay. So now that you have a few minutes of fun, here I want you to just tell me your experience. Tell me some comments or observations that you just witnessed. Go. Shout it out. Go. Yeah, so anything of the more social websites like Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, they're all ruined. Good. Anything else? Any other observation? Joel? Every video uses JavaScript. Yeah. Yeah. So this is dating how old I am, but when I grew up with the internet, I was used to the Wikipedia style of surfing. Okay, that's all I knew for the longest time. And the first website that blew my mind, and I'm asking myself, how did they develop that under the hood, web development wise, was when I first saw maps.google. When that first came out, I'm thinking, how the heck did they do that without refreshing a page again, right? I didn't realize there was something called Ajax under the hood that was fetching stuff. But so you guys growing up now, you've got it pretty good. You're growing up thinking that, oh, this is what websites ought to be. But it wasn't like that all the time. So here's where I'm leading into. Okay. If you think about back to the traditional definition, right? You have philosophy that says, make sure your websites are content first, always accessible, even if there's no JavaScript. You've just witnessed there's a lot of websites that don't follow that philosophy. Which is why in 2016, I believe, whatever year, there was this one guy who stepped in front of a conference, a big conference, and said the following quote: in 2016, it is okay to build a website that doesn't work without JavaScript. I want you to pull this link up. This link here is on my slides. It's also in Blackboard. So here in Blackboard, under week 6, under the in-class exercise, I put that link there as well. Show of hands who's already read this article, because this was in the pre-class to-dos. Anyone? Okay, it's all right. So when he said that during the conference, this is what happened. And there's a lot of drama, and that's why this is a hot topic and a debate. So he got the following tweet. So he said this: in 2016, it's okay to build a website that doesn't work without JavaScript. Then all hell broke loose. A bunch of developers said stuff like, no, just because bigger companies have websites that don't work without JS doesn't mean you should do it. Quote, I am so angry at the slide at the moment. Quote, co-signed with added expletives of exasperations. If you can't develop for the actual web, find a platform that suits you better. I'm exasperated by this push to require JS, but I'm angry at the conferences promoting these ideas. So this is a hot, debatable topic. Now, if you read his article, which I want you to do for the in-class exercise, he gives his argument. One of the best arguments, in my opinion, for his view is this under here, progressive enhancement for the next billion. He argues this: the next billion people who are poised to come online, including the third world countries, will be using the internet almost exclusively using smartphones. However, all these smartphones, they're running decent specs and they have an evergreen browser, which means they will be able to run JavaScript. What they won't have, however, is a reliable internet connection. So then he argues, if you read it, he argues that the term progressive enhancement, the definition itself should be now changed. He argues that progressive enhancement should now focus not on the content first, because we can reliably assume that modern evergreen browsers have JavaScript running. Rather, we should focus on the network, Wi-Fi, no Wi-Fi, Li-Fi, which is like you think you have Wi-Fi, but you really don't. And we should focus on that. So make your web pages work if there's like no Wi-Fi, using things like service workers, which we haven't learned yet, using IndexedDB, which I just briefly mentioned, so that your web page still kind of is functional, even if there's nothing. So this is the debate of the day. Your in-class exercise is to read this article and do the following. So here in class exercise 3, I ask you to create a markdown file in GitHub. So you can do that in GitHub if you want. You can just go to GitHub, or you could do it in VS Code and then upload it later. I'll just do it in GitHub right now. Okay. Actually, no, I'll do it in VS Code. It's faster. And so what's going to happen is, oops. In your first paragraph, just say this: one of the strongest arguments defending the notion that progressive enhancement ought to be the traditional model where content is always accessible is the following quote. So copy that whole line, put it in your markdown. We'll call this whatever. This is probably the only essay kind of assignment you'll get from any computer course in this college. All right. So you're writing me a very brief essay, basically. And then you will use the GitHub markdown way for a quote. So remember that was with the greater than sign, right? So then you find in the article what you think is the best argument for the traditional model, which I just lost. So let's quote, maybe I like this quote. No. So copy that, paste it in here, okay, and put the author. Who's the author on that? I forget. Let me see. Just say it's local developer, whatever. Okay, we'll just put that there. All right, so there. So now I have that quote, and then the next step is in your second paragraph. Say, on the other hand, those who take the view that progressive enhancement has changed such that JS running on the browser can be safely assumed in that the network is now the enhancement, will argue, copy that, open up a new paragraph, and then same kind of thing. Let's look for the article. Let's look at a good argument here for the other side. They'll have an evergreen browser kind of thing. Oh wait, hold on, maybe there's a better one. In a world, yeah. There you go. I like that one. I like that paragraph. So you copy that, paste it on there. So, and then the final step for your in-class exercise is this. Your concluding paragraph is state your own opinion. So, in my view, I think blah 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 blah. Couple of sentences, 5 sentences, but 5 sentences is max. That's all I'm looking for. Hand that in class exercise, you get 2%. Okay, so this is like your only essay kind of assignment in a computing code course.
You don't have to mark up
No, not for paragraphs. You don't have to mark up. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's something that I missed for paragraphs. But as far as I know, like, feel free to decorate it and play around with the different GitHub markdown things. You could maybe put a link to the article itself, right? So I forget how the link goes. I think it goes like this. I think where you have, is it the square brackets first? Okay. And then the link. All right. So I can say link to article here, and then here, paste this one here. Copy, paste. There, see, now it has that link, right? So if I were to upload that on GitHub right now, it would look like this nice view here on the right-hand side. This is just, I'm killing two birds with one stone here, just to get you thinking about the debate that's out there, what you'll be facing, and also get you learning a little bit about Markdown, which you might be having to use in the future as well. Okay. So I'll give you a few minutes to do that now, or yeah, give you a few minutes to do that now, and then we'll take a break now for, actually, because it's work period. Take a break, come back, and we'll help each other debug. All right. So you can hand in your in class, or you can help each other debug. Okay. So that is that. I'm gonna end the YouTube. Remember to enable your JavaScript if you haven't already. Remember.